Let's now discuss the state of the National Prosecution Authority and whether the institution really is facing a leadership crisis. And joining us now is Advocate Paul Hoffman from Accountability Now. Advocate, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to The Full View.
Good evening to you and to your viewers as well. Thank you for the opportunity.
The National Director of Public Prosecutions, Advocate Shamila Batohi, we saw her earlier on, and she was at pains earlier today in that media briefing trying to allay fears that the Prosecution Authority is facing a leadership crisis. But the writing is blatantly on the wall, isn't it, Advocate? I mean, as she's seemingly sweeping this monster under the carpet, what could she be possibly covering up?
Yes, no, I think that your assessment of the situation is accurate. I think that there is indeed a crisis in the NPA, and the inability of the leadership to actually face up to the crisis when they come onto the television screen with these dire expressions on their faces really undermines their own credibility. It would be far preferable if they were simply to accept that the NPA of today is a victim of the hollowing out and the planting of saboteurs. That's not my word, that's Cronje's word. And this is the first time I hear that they're on saboteurs. And having said that they're on saboteurs, the National Director goes on to say that there are disciplinary proceedings pending against saboteurs, and that she's not going to talk about that because that's their private business. It's very clear that the NPA is hobbled and that it is unable to deal with serious corruption in a manner that is effective and efficient. And it won't be able to for many a long year because of the hollowing out and the planting of cadres loyal to Jacob Zuma in the ranks of the NPA for the express purpose of seeing to it that impunity continues and that the orange outfits don't happen.
You speak of saboteurs, and I wonder then if it could possibly be an implication of interference. I mean, the NPA, you remember, has in the past fended off accusations of interference from the executive, but the entity is still hollowed out, plagued by shrinking budgets, and seemingly doesn't enjoy, I'd call it, the security of tenure of office to acquit itself of its anti-corruption mandate. It does explain, of course, why the big fish looters of state funds are still not behind bars.
Exactly. I mean, it's not as though state capture happened yesterday. State capture has been a problem in South Africa for a number of years, and COVID-preneurism is simply the latest manifestation of the feeling of entitlement among some people that the public purse is there to be robbed, and it doesn't really matter if PPE is not issued in our hospitals and to our frontline workers in the medical field. The money is simply channeled away for corrupt purposes. And really, the fact that the NPA knows that over R1 billion has been recovered from the crooks in the health department in Gauteng, and not one of them has been issued with their orange overalls, is a very poor reflection on the standard of work in the NPA. Look, there are pockets of excellence. There are very good people in the NPA. But as an institution, it is in trouble. And the solution has actually been proposed by the NEC of the ANC. That is the National Executive, which is the highest decision-making body in the African National Congress between the conferences that they hold every 4 years. And their solution is to instruct Cabinet urgently to establish a standalone, permanent, specialized, independent entity to deal with corruption. Now, that is exactly what the NPA is not. The independence, the Bathohi has been to Parliament to complain that she needs to have her independence beefed up as an institution. And she's right. The NPA is not as independent as it could and should be. It is hollowed out. She complains about lack of capacity and lack of capability. That's all true. And it's not going to be fixed, certainly as far as corruption is concerned, by trying to put Band-Aid onto the NPA. The national executive of the ANC has spoken, and nothing has been done. Their resolution was passed in August last year. The president announced in February this year that a standalone new statutory body would be in the works, and that he was going to appoint an advisory council just to kick that can down the road even further. It's not good enough. It's an urgent problem, and it needs to be dealt with. And if it was dealt with in the manner suggested by the National Executive Committee of the ANC, we would be far further down the road than we are now in relation to countering corruption and to ending the culture of impunity which is bankrupting the country.
Advocate, it's quite interesting that you touched on the independence of the NPA. I mean, in South African law, where a prima facie case exists, I mean, a duty to prosecute arises unless, of course, a compelling reason exists to decline to prosecute. Now, the NPA has maintained that it has a discretion not to prosecute, which discretion is not generally subject to judicial review, isn't it? Is such a discretion appropriate? I mean, should it be reviewed?
The difficulty really in relation to the independence of the NPA is that the Constitution says that the Minister of Justice has final responsibility over the NPA, and any decision made by the prosecuting authority, reasons have to be given to the minister if he asks for them. It's also so that the Director General of the Department of Justice is the accounting officer of the NPA. Now, those two features, the final responsibility of the minister and the accounting officer being somebody outside of the NPA, suggest very clearly that the ability of the NPA to act without fear, favor, or prejudice, in other words, to act independently, is limping, it's lacking. And I've congratulated the National Director for going to Parliament and for saying our independence as an institution needs to be looked at. But that is not going to solve the problem that led to Cronje resigning. She didn't resign because she got offered a better job somewhere else. She resigned in frustration because she was unable to do the job that she had been appointed to do. And if that is the case, then you have to look at the structure and operations that are in place. You can't have two cooks in the same kitchen. And unfortunately, it appears that there has been friction between Cronje and Bathohi in relation to the discharge of the mandate of the Investigating Directorate, which is supposedly headed by Cronje until March next year, but which also has to report to Bathohi because it is part of the NPA. That's not what the courts have said. The courts have said that there must be a single specialized unit that is independent, properly trained, properly resourced, and whose members enjoy secure tenure of office. Now, the ID essentially serves at the pleasure of Cabinet and the National Director.
All right.
That is not a secure way in which to tackle serious corruption, and it's never going to be. It needs to be re-looked at, and if it is re-looked at in the manner suggested by the NEC in August last year, then you will see the sort of reform that Accountability Now has been proposing for a decade, which is the creation of a separate, what we call an integrity commission.
We're out of time, unfortunately, Advocate, but thank you so much for your thoughts and for your analysis on this matter. We do appreciate your time. All right, that was Advocate Paul Hoffman, Director of Accountability Now, just sharing his thoughts on the apparent leadership crisis facing the National Prosecution Authority following the departure or the resignation of the Independent Directorate leader, Hermoine Cronje.